Yo, 95% Rookie here, and today I'll be going over Arma Reforger. Specifically, I'm going to try and cover the story, at least what we know so far, as it relates to Reforger's setting and surrounding events. And I'm gonna just put a disclaimer up front and say a lot of this video is going to be extrapolation, theory, and guessing, because when it comes to official sources like in-game dialogue and writing, there really isn't that much to go over to give us a feel for the world or events in the game, well, at least as they surround the game. That said, this is probably understandable, considering that Reforger is supposed to be a technical testbed for Arma 4, and the main focus was on being a playable product in the new engine. Still, the recent December update gave us a tutorial level, which actually has a bit more dialogue, which makes this video at all possible without being like 5 minutes long. So let's get into the lore of Arma Reforger and maybe Arma 4 a little bit. Okay, so to get started, the recent update has added a playable tutorial to Reforger, which essentially puts you as a US soldier stationed on Ireland. You go through a tutorial, completing various tasks by traveling across the island, learning the mechanics of the game and like weapon handling, engineering, building structures, capturing points, basically anything you can do in Reforger multiplayer. Before I go into the tutorial, I'll give a basic overview of what we know about Reforger's setting and lore before this update, which was mostly limited to trailers and small videos introducing the game. Arma Reforger is officially a spin-off title from this series, as made evident from the title and it not being Arma 4. The game's events probably should be taken with a grain of salt when it comes to the wider Arma universe's story, just because we haven't really had any other games mention the events that happened here. Likely, you know, partially because this game hadn't been planned or had come out before this, obviously. The game is stated as taking place in 1989, 4 years after the events of Cold War crisis. In that game, rogue Soviet forces were defeated, but as of Reforger, the threat of growing conflict still looms. We know that for some reason or another, US military and Soviet military forces have been landing on this island of Everon and are fighting for control of the area, with Green 4 FIA forces defending the island from both sides. That's really all we had to go off of before this recent update, although trailers certainly hinted at events that could really have been, you know, it hinted at events, but they could have just been representations of multiplayer conflict matches in trailer form, just to, you know, give you a feel for what the game would look like. Now, as for the tutorial, it starts with you waking up from your bed at the main feature of Ireland, the airfield. A soldier lets you know that the captain wants to speak to you and to grab your gear. After leaving your room, you come across an NCO watching over a private scrubbing his vomit from the bathroom floor. The NCO states that everyone is suffering from combat jitters, but he needs to get a hold of himself. He also mentions that he would be quite annoyed if Colonel Gray came in and slipped on the vomit. So we can surmise that Colonel Gray must be a high-ranking officer, or most probably the acting commanding officer of this island, or both this island and Everon. Walking outside, we get briefed by the captain, who wants us to conduct training to ensure we are ready for upcoming action. After dismissing us, he gets into some dialogue which explains some of the current situation. As we understand it, the Soviets and Americans are currently fighting over Everon, with Ireland being the next Soviet target after Everon falls. He also doesn't think that Everon can hold out forever, implying the Soviets at least have a small upper hand when it comes to the fighting. The US Second Fleet is in the area, and there is an opposing Soviet fleet also operating. It's not known if there have been any naval engagements yet, but it seems like, for whatever reason, both fleets are still operating, supporting their ground forces on the island. Captain goes over various ways that we can defend the island, such as guessing that the Soviets will land at the town of Beauregard, since it's the natural landing point on Ireland where the US forces also landed. The captain also stresses that anyone who isn't dead or who can operate a gun should be considered combat effective when it comes to defending the island, implying the US forces don't have the manpower to replace walking wounded. He hints at a bleak situation for US forces here, although we have to keep in mind that we don't really know exactly what is going on in the wider war, so it could be the Soviets are facing similar difficulties. After leaving the captain, we can listen in on a sergeant addressing his squad, who gives us some more information. He mentions that Operation Brightwork has gone to plan, which I'm guessing was the name of the operation to seize Ireland from the local FIA guerrillas in preparation for Soviet forces attacking the island. The US forces hold the airfield, and the local FIA guerrillas are currently playing nice, so it can be assumed that there is no open fighting between Green 4 and Blue 4, at least on Ireland, at the current moment. There have been reports of gear and weapons going missing, which were probably taken by the FIA, who are probably preparing to begin fighting once the Soviets land. Colonel Gray has let Ireland know that the situation on Everon is messy, with the Russians landing at the same time as US forces. A hint is given about something happening in Europe, but we have no idea if there's fighting going on or what's going on in Europe exactly. Capturing the island of Ireland has evidently given the US forces on Everon a reprieve, likely because the airfield on Ireland can be used to support Everon, or at the very least the Soviets can't use it as a base of support for their forces there. There really isn't that much beyond that in the tutorial when it comes to story, at least not that I have found. There may be some hidden dialogue I've missed, or maybe even later updates to the tutorial could add more, but as it currently stands, this is all I've found. After completing all training missions, the captain debriefs us and lets us know to get some rest, or get some more training since the Soviets could be preparing to attack Ireland at any moment. As for what could be going on in the wider story, or what I think this story could mean for a potential Arma 4, I'll end the video with some speculation. Based on the fact that there are Soviet and US fleets around the island of Everon in Ireland who have deemed it a necessity to fight over these small islands, it seems likely that another flashpoint has occurred similar to most Arma stories in which a small event has ballooned into a wider conflict which threatens World War III. Possible things are still constrained, and the fact that the Soviet and US fleets are both still operating implies that there hasn't been a decisive naval engagement forcing either of them to withdraw. The fact that there are ground battles raging over the islands implies that it's possible both sides want to constrain the conflict without escalating it too much. Since a large Soviet or American fleet sinking would likely spark the risk of nuclear strikes or further open combat. We know that something is going on in Europe, as the sergeant describes it as snafu, but it seems unlikely that a full-on war is raging. My guess is it's mostly military posturing with high tensions. It's possible that these events in the game could be referenced directly or indirectly in Arma 4. We don't really know anything about a potential setting for Arma 4, but my guess it would most likely be in a similar time slot and setting to Reforger, just so they can reuse a lot of the work they've done for this game. Maybe the situation discussed going on in Europe is another flashpoint which we'll see taking place in Arma 4, but it's more likely that the story going on in Reforger is background fluff to a multiplayer focused test game. The wider implications and effects are going to be minimal. Anyway, that's about all I could squeeze from Reforger's lore and setting. It's understandable that there really isn't that much to go off of, but I hope Arma 4 has a greater focus on single player and story to give me more to talk about. Hope you liked the video, and please do like and subscribe, and comment below if you want to give me your thoughts on this potential story for Arma 4 or anything related to Reforger or this video. I do my best to try and read all comments, even if I don't always respond. I was hoping to have this released before Christmas and New Year's, but obviously ended up coming out a bit later than that. But anyways, hope you had a happy New Year and Christmas, and I hope you have a good 2025. Expect more videos soon. Thank you. See ya.